York Times, in case you don't read it, still being published, still out of New York, ran a piece the other day with this headline: Alarm, Denial, Blame, the pro-Trump media's coronavirus distortion. They hit the same themes. In the telling of the New York Times, coronavirus coverage on this show and elsewhere followed a certain pattern. The pattern, they told us, went this way. Step one, blame China. According to the New York Times, quote, when the virus ravaged China, some pundits on the right warned that the country couldn't be trusted to contain the outbreak or share accurate information about where it originated. Can you believe they thought that? Where they got that idea? Because it's true, but the New York Times doesn't admit that. Then step two, playing down the risks, followed by step three, share survivor stories to show the virus wasn't so bad, and finally step four, blame the left. Now, as you're aware from watching this program and from living in this country, whatever these people accuse you of doing is 100% of the time exactly what they're doing themselves. And that, of course, was the case here. As you know, the establishment press has been screwing up coronavirus stories from day one. So there are 4 steps to understanding their coverage, and here's what they are. The first step, as usual, blame racism. Here are 2 New York Times headlines from the early days of the outbreak. Quote, an outbreak of racist sentiment as coronavirus reaches Australia. In other words, people's bad opinions are worse than a pandemic. Here's another. In Europe, fear spreads faster than the coronavirus itself. Okay. So then, as the virus kept spreading, there was step 2, play down the risks, which the New York Times assiduously did. On January 29th, the paper warned you to, quote, beware the pandemic panic. Calm down, ladies and gentlemen. A week later, they asked, who says it's not safe to travel to China? Book a ticket to Wuhan, racist! Somehow, telling the public the coronavirus was no big deal didn't in the end contain the virus, so the Times went to step 3, politicize the crisis. Calling the coronavirus the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus is bigotry, the paper will tell you, but they had no problem on February 26th publishing an op-ed saying, quote, let's call it Trump virus. And then last week, in a shameful moment that will live forever in infamy, the paper declared, and I'm quoting, the road to coronavirus hell was paved by evangelicals. Yeah, that's right. A pandemic that emerged from the atheist country is really the fault of Christians, says the New York Times. That tells you a lot about where they are. And now this week, the paper has settled on its favorite step. Step 4, blame Fox News. Of course, because there's a political strategy here. Last week, they warned about, quote, Fox's fake news contagion. Then there was yesterday's article. Talk about a lie. This show was telling you about the dangers of this disease way back in January, when the Times was still wondering if it was racist to even know it existed, and encouraging you to travel to Wuhan on vacation. Now, we're highlighting the continued dishonesty and malevolence of China. Meanwhile, the New York Times and the star reporter Donald McNeil is going over to MSNBC to deliver unpaid infomercials for the Chinese Communist Party. Watch this.
In China, there are 40,000 doctors, nurses, and respiratory technicians went from all over China to Wuhan and helped the Wuhan doctors fight the virus. There's no more virus in Wuhan. Those doctors are all gone home. There have been victory parades for them, gratitude, flowers, and everything. They're heroes. They not only have the skills, a lot of them caught the virus and are now immune. So they can do a lot of things that would be dangerous for somebody who hasn't got the virus to do. I don't see why we couldn't hire for our pandemic a lot of those doctors, nurses, respiratory technicians.
So, if you're Donald McNeil's editor and you're watching this, aren't you calling his supervisor saying, bring McNeil in, he's giving away the truth? What a shill. Bring in Chinese doctors to run our hospital. That's his take. It's not surprising, though. Apparently Chinese doctors already run the New York Times. Well, the new unemployment figures are horrifying. They're the largest in American history, almost by an order of magnitude. In 2 weeks, 10 million people have lost their jobs. Even more jobs will be lost soon. So where exactly are we headed, and what can we do to stem the bleeding at this point? People are getting worried, and they should. Melissa Francis hosts After the Bell on Fox Business. She joins us tonight for an overview. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Tucker. Well, you saw those numbers today, and they are bad. I mean, they are really bad, and what is terrifying about them, as you highlighted, is that it is only the beginning. Because what we've done is we've shut down the economy. We've kept all the customers inside, so all the businesses have shut their doors basically, except for the ones that are delivering us our essentials, and the rest have, fired or furloughed their employees, which means that now those businesses, whether we're talking about Macy's or we're talking about the airlines or we're talking about hotels, they now can't pay their suppliers, and they can't pay their rent. Now those suppliers, same problem. They can't pay their rent, they can't pay their bills. So if you watch the chain reaction go through the economy, it all goes back to the banks. Remember, the last crisis started with the banks and went down to the bottom. This one started bottom up. So as it goes around and around, the banks are the ones that ultimately are going to be left holding the bag. What do? Do they all simultaneously go and foreclose on every airplane, every restaurant, every building, every chair, every factory? No, they don't want those things. What are they going to do with them? There's no customers out there. So it all goes back to the bank, and the same thing is happening all around the world. Just to make it worse, this is happening on a global level. So we're watching a massive meltdown. And when you ask, how do you stop the bleeding? I don't know who knows that answer. I mean, the only thing you can think of, I hear some people in economic circles talking about, is there a way to press pause and no one pays anyone? And rather than the guy in the middle who's saying, well, I can't pay you and then I also can't get paid, do we press pause somehow? But it would take, the best financial minds to sort of figure out how exactly would you do that? I don't know. But it is a massive problem. It is getting worse, and it's happening everywhere in the globe. I'm glad Jamie Dimon is back on the job at JP Morgan, because he's one of the smartest bankers out there, but we're going to need everybody to get together and find a solution.